Hi, my name is Aaron. Welcome to my channel and welcome to my garden. I've got one of my favorite orchids blooming today. This is Prosthechea cochleata. It's also known as the clamshell or cockleshell orchid. This is actually one of our native orchids here in Florida. It grows on trees as an epiphyte in the Everglades and surrounding areas. It gets its name as the clamshell or cockleshell orchid because it has these flowers with a clamshell shaped lip that's actually at the top of the flower. So it's sort of upside down from most orchid flowers, and then the petals and sepals hang down below. Since I've got such a nice native plant growing here in my garden, I'm going to go ahead and take it into my studio and paint it. So I went ahead and did most of the drawing for this one already off camera, and now I just need to focus on the flowers and refine this drawing a little bit. Each stem of this plant has a pseudobulb, which is a pear-shaped structure at the bottom of the stem, and then two leaves that come off the top of it, and the flower stem comes out between the leaves here. For the flowers, I've got one facing forward, one off to the side at a bit of a 3/4 angle, and then one where we're going to see the back of it. These petals and sepals really twist, and it's a bit of a tricky thing to draw, so I'm going to be really careful and study the reference closely. I'm going to make sure we get the shape of this cockleshell lip just right. It's the namesake of this orchid. And then the column sits upright right in here with a bunch of markings and lines that lead the pollinators right to it. So I actually already painted this orchid once before. That was 3 or 4 years ago. And one of the reasons I wanted to paint it again is over that time I've improved both drawing and painting, orchids in particular. So it'll be interesting to see how this one compares to the last painting I did of this plant. Alright, so after a little bit more refinement of the drawing, I'm ready to start mixing up some paint. The main thing that I've been using lately for these foliage greens is green gold mixed with cobalt turquoise. And I'm going to start in with some loose, light washes on the leaves with that color. I'm going to keep this very light at this stage and try to preserve a sense of light and the highlights on the shiny leaves. And then in the drawing, this is actually the underside of the leaf where it folds over. That tends to be a little bit darker and duller color than the top side of the leaf. A lot of times I'm sort of intentionally messy and loose with my color mixing, especially for something like this green color. I think it's a lot more interesting than if you were to do a really homogeneous mixture or use a color straight out of the tube. You get these little areas where it's slightly more blue or slightly more yellow, and it just creates a slightly more interesting painting if you just kind of let the colors blend together a little bit more organically. Now, when it comes to the flowers, I need a base tone for most of them of really pale greenish yellow. But before I do that, I want to lighten my pencil lines because If my pencil lines are too dark and then I start to paint over them, it's going to become much harder to erase them later, and that'll be very noticeable underneath this light pale color. And this kneaded eraser is a very useful tool. I highly recommend getting one of those. And now I'm just going to go in with that first layer of pale yellow. So for the first layer of the clamshell part, I'm going to go with a nice yellow color, and we'll add in the darker details later. So that quick first layer of paint helps establish our basic colors, but we really need to go a lot deeper, starting with the greens. I always like to rotate my watercolor block around just to make it a lot easier for my hand to get at the right angle for these brush strokes. And the most important thing is that these leaves don't feel flat. So I have plenty of shiny highlights, and I usually try to make the highlight tones a little more blue than the parts where the leaf is in a bit more shadow. Remember that when you want to have a color of a leaf go into shadow, or any object go into shadow, not only should the color be darker, but it should also be less saturated. It's going to take a few layers of green to build up this color to the full strength that I want, but I don't want to rush it. And while the green paint on the leaves is drying, we can jump back to the flowers for a little bit. Helps to move around and work on different parts of the painting like this while your paint's drying, so that you don't have problems working into wet paint. And here's where I like to get a very small round brush and some light paint, and if I just sort of draw with the brush and start figuring out all of these little details, the goal is to replace everything that's left of those pencil lines with very light layers of paint. It's okay to start working in detail like this, as long as you don't go too dark yet. I've got the stem of the inflorescence and the individual flowers mixed in here with all these twisty petals. So I wanted to find those and give them some separation by darkening the green color on those stems. For the roots and the papery sheaths around the base of the pseudobulb, I'm going to use a grayish brown color that you basically get by mixing an earth tone like burnt sienna with a blue like ultramarine. At this point I'm going to do a lot of erasing. I don't want pencil lines holding things together. I want everything to be paint. With the pencil lines gone, I can see that these leaves are quite rough around the edges. So I can address that by going with my brush, painting up to the edge, and then pulling into this leaf with some water. Okay, it's time to start really pushing the depth and detail on these flowers. I need to add a bit more shadow behind the column here, really make that pop out. And we'll get a bit of a sense of the concave cockleshell shape with a little bit of shadow up here as well. This little detail is the pollinia, which is the bundle of sticky pollen that the pollinators will use to pick up and pollinate to another orchid. So that's the bright yellow dot that you see in the middle of the flower there on the tip of the column. And we might as well start to bring some definition into the few buds that are at the tip of this inflorescence. These buds have a cool shape. It's basically those three sepals, those three twisty sepals kind of all wrapped together around the rest of the flower before it unfurls. And that's the technical difference between a sepal and a petal, is that the sepals are on the outside here as the flower is closed, and the petals are on the inside. Okay, so at this point there's just a lot more refinement of this painting that I need to do. So I'm just going to use a small brush, take it slow, and dive into the details. Okay, now we can finally start going for that really dark, almost black color on these flowers. It's a really unusual color that you don't see very often in flowers. It's like a dark purple, almost brownish, close to black. And I like that on the back of this flower here, we see a lot of that color. And then on the front-facing flowers, there's some very intricate patterns of these darker colors that I'm going to try to recreate based on my reference. Alright, so I'm just about finished with this one. This is the Prosthechea cochleata cockleshell orchid. Since this is one of the orchids that's native to Florida, it's definitely one of my favorites, and one that I've painted before and one that I'll probably paint again someday. So I've got some other native orchids that are going to be blooming soon, and I'll probably paint those also. So be sure to follow along, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.